Let's talk about the current state of Path of Exile 2, as well as specifically the in-game in this video. We're going to talk about some of the recent events that have happened and what I expect to see in response from GGG now that they're back in the offices after the holidays, and what we might expect in the upcoming patch here. Now, the first thing we should talk about is there have been a lot of hacks going on. In fact, so much so that when I saw this message this morning, I thought to myself, uh-oh, another person's logged into my account. I sure hope that I'm good. But then I remembered I just had to log back into the game because I was playing on the console last night. I actually streamed it for 10 hours, and then I thought, I'm going to log off and go play on the console, and I played on the PlayStation a little bit to try to get a better experience of what it feels like on the console as well. First thing I want to mention after playing on console, we absolutely need a loot filter or an in-game built-in loot filter if they can't get third-party ones to work. You need something for console. I wouldn't say it's completely unplayable, but it's getting there. When you start getting higher level in the maps, I tried doing like a breach and everything on the console, and between the little bit of lag you're going to get on the console, depending upon your settings, as well as the loot being, you have to like actually click like the X button to pick up each one of the individual loots, etc. It's very difficult, to say the least. In terms of actually playing and acquiring loot. So it's much slower on the console. It's much more difficult. You have to tab through every single piece of loot. And when you kill one monster because you juiced out the maps and it drops like 30 items, it's, borderline impossible basically to acquire loot at any pace to make real progression. And since you're tied into the same economy as PC, time is money, friend. And because of that reason, just how much slower it is on console, it puts you at an innate disadvantage. So I think a loot filter would be significant improvement in terms of gameplay for console players. Now, speaking of the economy, I would be amiss not to mention the current issue that's going on in the economy. There has been duplications. My understanding of this, and I could be wrong, but what I've seen people say is that they were creating new instances in the final boss of the Trial of Sekima, and able to just kill him like over and over and over again, basically, and just farm him for his super rare drop. And this isn't technically a duplication, but you're duplicating the instance, and the instance guarantees the drop if you're doing like a no-hit run, etc. So for that reason, they basically flooded the market with one of the most expensive items in the game. Now, when it comes to economy-related stuff, I don't expect the early access league. And if you don't know how it's going to work, this server, this league, okay, where everyone's interacting with, will stay early access. And when a new league comes out, and they will be doing leagues during early access, it's a fresh start, much like every ARPG. It's like a season, a cycle, a league, whatever you want to call it. And so we're all going to have fresh starts. So if everyone's blowing their load as like a cheater in order to basically duplicate and exploit stuff early, then you're going to be able to discover these issues and hopefully be able to patch them out. I would expect this one is going to be easy to discover, considering they can just look at the people's accounts that have a billion of the items that are like supposed to be giga rare, and then be able to determine the factors. In fact, I think people already have determined the factors that led up to cause these types of issues. And so I do expect this to be something that's like a speed bump in the road. I would hope that this is going to be solved, patched out, no problem. If this continues to happen, not just this one, but we're seeing major scale duplications in the economy in every league, then there would be a much larger cause of concern of mine. We saw this in Diablo 4 with duplications. We saw this in Last Epoch with duplications. It's never a good impact in the economy, and more so from a moral standpoint, of the player base themselves. This Last Epoch devs made a notable point in this. It's like the data and how much duplication actually happened was fairly small, but the impact on the player base was actually fairly significant because people get demoralized in terms of when they actually look at duplications happening. They feel even more behind in the economy. They feel like other people are cheating, and it makes them not want to play as much. So we take the duplications, the economy, standpoint at the moment. We mix it with the fact that like the etiquette in trading that made the game so smooth. Before the etiquette was someone's buying an item, the person who's buying goes to the seller then is the one that starts the trade. Consistency is smooth is fast. That's why etiquette exists in PoE1, not so much from an ego standpoint of like, hey, you need to come to me, I'm the seller, I'm the, up in the pecking order. It's there to be consistent. Consistent is smooth is fast. So with the lack of sort of etiquette that's happening with all the new players that are still learning these types of things, we're seeing a much clunkier, lower quality of life trading experience. There's issues on the website where divines are showing over Exiles. We have the duplication. The long and short of it is it's effectively trading's a little bit of a clusterfuck at the moment. And all of this has led me to try other game mode, solo self-found, like the Iron Man basically version of the game. And because of that, I've been interacting with a lot more of the mechanics myself. And I found that my feelings on the game significantly improved when I removed myself from the trading atmosphere. I do think the trading atmosphere will improve with the game when people start learning the etiquette, the duplications are solved, they tune the numbers a little bit. I know there's discussion around rarity and all that. I'm actually kind of in the middle on rarity. I feel like I was just complaining about not getting currency drops, but now I can actually get currency drops. So I'm not quite sure. I just want to gut my currency drops again. But I do understand rarity might be a little bit overtuned. But in the conversation, the economy and trading, I'm not so much concerned with these issues in the game, to be quite honest with you. I believe these are things from a dial tune and how much currency we're getting. They've already turned it up. They can turn it back down if it really becomes an economy inflating issue. The other portion of it is literally exploits that will get patched out of the game, and we have a fresh start economy league coming. And as far as the player trading experience, they just have to fix the website where it doesn't show divines over Exile at a certain point. That's easy enough. And then players will learn the etiquette. It will become a lot smoother. Now, in terms of the actual gameplay and in-game gameplay specifically, I've already talked about my feelings on the campaign. I've got to say, it actually doesn't feel that bad, in my opinion. I have a few caveats, which is that there are some pinnacle bosses that feel near perfect. I think breach is what I would consider a near perfect mechanic. You go into a breach, you collect a bunch of splinters. Your agency over being able to do the pinnacle boss is transparent and clearly communicated. More monsters, more breach splinters, stand on the hands, get more breach splinters. You need 300 of them. You can see your progression as you go through, and therefore you feel a sense of agency and control over the progression of your character as you're doing breaches and progression towards the pinnacle bosses. And it's also satisfying from just a mob killing standpoint and from a reward standpoint. So I think breach is probably the best feeling mechanic overall in the entire game at the moment. But I want to hone in on the agency portion of my feedback for this. You see, when you do delirium, you get splinters as well. So you get that same sense of agency and being able to, at least tell you're getting splinters. Those splinters on delirium are significantly reduced. I know you have to anoint them, etc., but you get a lot less than breach. However, the other mechanics, let's say expedition, for instance, or ritual, these boss mechanics are effectively RNG. So if I want to do the pinnacle boss of expedition, I just got to do a bunch of expeditions till I get a logbook. And then I get a logbook at level 79 or higher, and I have a chance for the expedition boss just to show up. It is basically pure RNG in relation to how to actually get him to show up to begin. And I know there's points you can put in that changes all of these factors, et cetera. We'll talk about that with ritual too. But because there is no progression bar while you're doing expedition in terms of how close you're getting to the breachstone, which effectively these breachstone splinters count sort of as a progression bar, you just feel like it's a big gamble. Now, this would be fine with maybe one of the bosses, but effectively it's basically all of the bosses, because once you start doing the search for Arbiter, and we managed to finally kill Arbiter, as you can see here, we're in SSF and you only get this from Arbiter. Once you're actually searching for Arbiter, it's again, you have to go out and get Citadels. Now, it seems to me, and this is a conspiracy theory, I'm just throwing this out here, I don't think I have any proof at all at this, but it seems to me the farther you get from the center, or maybe the higher level you get, I think it's farther from the center, that you start getting more and more and more Citadels. I'm getting a pretty decent amount of these things at this point, so I'm not really feeling as much of a crunch to find these, but it does seem to me specifically one of the Citadels seems rarer than the other ones. I'll get iron and stone Citadels all day, but getting copper Citadels for me specifically are extremely rare. And I've heard other cases where people are well, I get copper and stone, but I can't find iron. So I don't know if it's one of them is rare for you, if it's pure RNG or what, but you do feel a bit of a lack of agency, again, over finding these Citadels. I actually don't think this would be a big deal in finding the lack of Citadels. If there was something in the game, I mentioned this prior, that should point you in the direction or gave you some sense of how to actually get these, or if you just left them as they were, but then the expedition bosses weren't RNG, or if the ritual bosses weren't basically RNG as well. And you have to do the rituals, and then you have to find the audience for a king that just happens to show up. And you can reroll to try to get them to show up, etc. And then you got to defer it a whole bunch if you can't afford it until you get it. It's got to show up again. And so it feels like RNG once again. So basically you have Ritual, Expedition, and Arbiter, which are three of the pinnacle bosses all feel basically like you have a lack of agency as a player to be able to get a boss fight. The very positive side of this is the boss fights are actually really cool. Like the Arbiter fight is pretty cool. It is, I would say, exceptionally difficult and full of one-shots, and you basically either one-shot him in the beginning before he does it. I mean, that's kind of the way they do it. You one-shot him before he even does the mechanics, or you got like a long, kind of difficult fight that's maybe a little bit bullshit because you can stack like one-shot mechanics sort of on top of each other, and there's some bugs related to when you do damage where he can literally do like 2 screenshots on opposite sides of each other in a time that you can't get in. I've seen videos of that as well. So like there is some obvious tuning that needs to be done, but the fights are actually quite cool. And I would consider Breach Pinnacle boss fight, like I think the best fight in the game. I think it feels really great. If you're not one-shotting him, actually having to dodge the fist and everything, I think that is a really well-designed, really fun boss fight with a progression sense to get there that actually feels good as well. Not only that, but it's well rewarding with monster killing, etc., with lots of experience. So the boss fights themselves are actually fairly impressive and enjoyable. So there's sort of a mix of, some of them are very well attuned. Breach is like perfect. They nailed it. I think the RNG of Ritual and, Expedition's a little bit of the bummer, but, you got cool boss fights. Like King of the Mist is super, super enjoyable boss fight. Don't want to ruin it or whatever for you, but it's a very enjoyable boss fight with some really cool mechanics in it. And then there's some mechanics in the game that like basically don't even need to exist because everyone just ignores them anyway, which is going to be your strong boxes. Like when have you ever seen an Atlas tree in which someone goes down here and takes strong boxes? Like probably not. They might as well not exist. This is extremely slow to open, so much so that you're basically wasting your time to do these. The loot isn't very exciting either. And if you didn't know, you get like a normal strong box, you can like rego it, or you can augment orbit or exalt slam and all that type of stuff. You can actually craft on the boxes to make them open more loot, but it's basically a giant waste of time to do it. And opening the boxes, the monsters come out so slow anyway that like I basically just skip strong boxes. If you have a decent enough build, doing the strong boxes is actually going to lower your loot and experience per hour just by stopping to do them. And there was a portion of a chat that we had when I interviewed Jonathan in which they mentioned that the strong boxes are supposed to be a lot faster than that like they were going to patch that to not be so slow. But it looks like that iteration of it being so slow has actually been in the game, and I think this hasn't happened yet. So I'd expect in the next patch for this to actually be changed, as it currently stands, strong boxes might as well not exist in the game. They are completely worthless. Now, I do think essences are pretty close to the same thing. Essences exist, but the greater essence portion of it, I haven't found any way around it. And I can do the tier 16, 17, 18 maps. I can do all the shit. I haven't found a way where the essences are altered by quantity, rarity, tier of the map in order to have greater essences show. So I actually got more greater essences literally like in the campaign than I have in all of in-game mapping. And it just seems, again, RNG. So the only thing that would be good about essences is really maybe if I could have normal essence and then augment and then greater essence, we might have a sense of crafting in the game. And we're going to talk about crafting here in just a moment. But as it currently stands, this is another mechanic that needs to be very highly retuned because it's basically, again, nearly completely worthless other than if you're slamming a white item, and white item bases are actually very rare as well. I think that I wouldn't mind the essences as much if the white item bases were actually maybe like a decently more common for the high level tier ones. You get more blue than you do white bases, and so even having the bases to craft with the essence on, or maybe use Orb of Chance, it's like pretty rare. I'm constantly waiting for stellar amulets to drop so I can use my Orb of Chances, and the fact that I have more Orbs of Chances than the white, supposedly common base that I actually need in order to use those Orbs of Chances seems like a mismatch, in terms of what the drop rates actually are. It doesn't make sense to me that I'm acquiring, 10 unique items to disenchant into a Chance of Orb before I'm acquiring one white base of the base that I need, or even bases to craft on in general for bases that are useful for me. So there is something weird about the drop rates that might alter the usefulness of essences in particular if those drop rates get focused on. Now, I know you see that I haven't done these essences here. Actually, on my trade character, I did actually work on doing these essences as well. This is my SSF character, like my newer characters here that I haven't done everything on yet. And with this fully maxed out, the essences still feel absolutely terrible. All right, one of the other conversations I've seen people say is, why are all the streamers playing the same build? Like, there's a lack of build variety in the game. Well, if you look here, we have a bunch of weapons that are still coming to the game. Crossbows are in the game, swords are not, spears are not, daggers are not, flails are not, axes are not. So we have a very, primo, whatever primo is going to be. We have a significant amount of variety that I believe will actually be coming to the game. And those should be arriving with the classes that are still to come in the game. For instance, daggers are going to show up with the Shadow. Primal will show up with the Druid. Flail is going to show up with the Templar. Marauder is going to be the Axe. If you cut the Spirit Gem, you can actually see all the classes, and they will very perfectly lined up with the weapon portion of these tabs as well. And for as little weapons as there are, I actually don't think the variety in the game is that bad. You are seeing people play sort of the same builds over and over again because the strongest build typically prevails. This isn't really that different from Path of Exile 1, and to be honest, with as few things as we have, I don't think the variety is that bad. In Path of Exile 1, by the end of the league, everyone was just playing like Lightning Strike in the last league anyway. So this isn't really something I'm that majorly concerned about as well. There's also a lot more abilities you could use that people are just not really using predominantly because they're just either not as good or don't clear the screen as fast, and people are running trade and trying to farm currencies, and so they're looking for screen clear. Now, where there's not a lot of variety, and one of the points that does bum me out a little bit in terms of balance is at the moment, and this is something, again, I think we're going to see addressed here in an upcoming patch, the best thing to basically run is Energy Shield. If you are running a character, let's say like a monk, in which you could do, kind of everything because of where you're located, or even like me, a Gimli, where I could go, armor and evasion, etc. Like, there's not really a reason to run anything other than as much Energy Shield as you can get. In fact, even I saw a video by Crip in which he's playing, I believe it was Warbringer, or maybe it was Titan, and he is running Energy Shield from a warrior, and he's only using armor to make his Energy Shield charge faster. So basically everyone from every class, if they can make it work, is going to run Energy Shield because it is the strongest defense in the game. Stacking life at the moment is not really something that is too plausible of a solution. Stacking mana is, and you can use the mind over matter. So you're seeing a lot of mana type of stackers, but basically everything other than like life and armor, you can kind of like evasion's pretty good, energy shield's pretty good, mana stacking's pretty good, but armor and life are just not really in the state. So if you're in kind of this portion of the tree, it's kind of brutal right now. So with Energy Shield being so strong, like, why would I stack armor in order to block like 30% of a boss's slam when I can literally just stack Energy Shield, have 4,800 Energy Shield, and then use a move like Meditate or something to double my Energy Shield, or Grim Feast, double my Energy Shield, and I have like 10,000 HP. Well, if I'm stacking like armor and HP, I can have like 4, maybe 5,000 HP on the higher end and block 30% of the damage, or I can just literally have double as much HP. So the math doesn't math for like, life as well as armor, unfortunately, currently. But there's a common theme you're going to be hearing with all of these feedback points, which is everything is sort of just like they just got to get the dial right. They're all number percentage-based issues and feedback points that are fairly easily solvable, sort of like we saw in the last patch. Remember, everyone's complaining we're getting one shot of the maps, the sustain is bad, chaos damage is overtuned. They go and do the dial, and that conversation has died down significantly. You can survive in maps now. Now people are starting to actually play hardcore. You can see a lot of the people are out there playing hardcore and doing like pretty well in it. So the state of the balance of the damage with a little bit of tuning solved a lot of that issue immediately. So I'm not really feeling discouraged in terms of the state of the game. And I know there's been a lot of people that are coming out with some very vocal feedback, not necessarily from like veterans of the game, but I would say like you look at the comment sections of any of these review videos at the moment, and you're going to see a lot of people like, this is a total trash game, like everything's terrible. And the reality is, I actually think the game is fairly enjoyable. Like, I'm enjoying it even more now in solo self-found. And the feedback points that I have either presented about like the Citadels were some of my recent videos, the issues I'm bringing up in this video, etc. These are all like decently easy things to solve. The core of the game is actually quite enjoyable, and the builds that you can do are actually quite fun, in my opinion. There's some very easy changes they need to make in terms of like armor percentages, how much it actually does. I think there are a few core things that, like the way some of the bosses are with the RNG. I think some RNG bosses are fine, but also there is one other thing to mention, which I think is a fair point of feedback, which is like crafting kind of doesn't exist in the game. So you have these orbs, the orbs slam on modifiers, like I already talked about essences. The other orbs with slam on more modifiers. Yes, there's the omens. The omens are giga rare, so for people that aren't in Trade League, they basically don't exist. Or for people that are in Trade League, they're super expensive. So trying to actually do crafting with orbs is like giga meta craft, and for the cost of an omen, you can basically just buy the item. You could maybe omen out anyway. So it's like the omens don't really make a lot of sense at the moment. So crafting kind of doesn't exist in the game. I think that as I think about the future of the game, this is going to be solved with the additional league launches. I think they were trying to get the core of the game out, and then what they're going to do from here on out is as leagues are coming out, they're going to add more and more crafting to the game with the additional league mechanics. And they probably didn't want to let the cat out of the bag and like have all of these crafting options and then have items be like immediately deterministic from the start of the game. They probably wanted to see what the base of the game was like and then be like, where do we really need to add something for crafting? I will say there is one portion of the game that I think the more I play the game, the more I feel like it was potentially a mistake, which is that runes being removable makes me feel like I can't slot and interact with my gear as I acquire it, and is especially punishing for newer players. Putting something like if you're trying to fix your resistances, you're kind of incentivized to never socket gear as you get upgrades, or to play around having sockets open and not being able to interact with the sockets as you acquire gear just doesn't feel right to me. Like I feel like I should be able to override and just lose what was in there, and I don't really see the punishment of I put something in there, now I can never change it, as a punishment that really makes a lot of sense to me. I would say that maybe if we're going to have a punishment or a tie related to how you can do this, you could just lower the drop rates of the runes if you think they should be rarer and therefore they're a little bit more expensive and people don't want to put them in. So you have a currency related punishment, but actually completely locking you out of the piece of gear. Like if you get a really good piece of gear or something, like I like this one here, and I got armor evasion energy shield, I'm just putting that in it just to try to hope that it will continue to be good and I'll solve my resistances somewhere else, I guess. But you get these 3 sockets from vowing it. Maybe if you vowed, and corrupted it, and then once you put sockets into a corrupted one, you can't change it. That would maybe make more sense because it's corrupted. You can't change it afterwards. So you corrupt it, then you put the runes in, and once runes go into a corrupted one, you can't pull them out of a corrupted one. Might be a more fair balance because then it's only on 3 sockets. But as people are progressing through the game, as they're getting into maps, etc., I feel like being able to re-socket the runes of the gear isn't really that big of a deal to me, and would probably be more fair. Sometimes you just run into a situation where you have like, you're 12% overcapped on one and the other one is, you're 12% under, and you're like, man, if only I could swap these runes, the new piece of gear I got would be absolutely perfect and an upgrade and would be a feel-good moment. So we'll see what GGG feels like on this one, but I have seen this feedback point multiple times, and as the game goes on, I'm more and more siding with, I think we should be able to resocket these runes. I gotta say, though, sort of removing myself from trade because the trade was just annoying me and was having the inflation issues, which actually allows me to use my currency to like slam and, craft gear, even though crafting kind of doesn't exist, allows me to actually use my currency playing through the game and trying to actually pursue the bosses through going through the mechanics, etc., has made the game like significantly more enjoyable in its current state. I'm actually enjoying the game more as it goes on, and as I'm building other characters out and kind of messing with the builds, etc. I would say like yesterday, today have been some of the peak enjoyment in terms of like how I'm feeling about the game has been like kind of lately. So I'm pretty excited to see the patch that they come out with, because I think as they start to address some of the feedback points we've seen related to the game, I'm more and more believing that the core of this game is actually just super good. Like I'm starting to believe it's super good, super solid. Most of the tuning issues that I'm running into or feedback points I'm looking at aren't really that big of a deal. I'd say the economy is a little bit of a feel bad for a lot of people. And I think the economy is something that, again, is a number thing that can be tuned and exploits can be solved and all of that. But I will say, in my opinion, there are two major things that I think to need to happen for the game as soon as they can possibly implement them, okay? Number one, most biggest thing, two-factor authentication for accounts, please. People getting hacked constantly. We're seeing YouTube videos popping up for them. We're seeing lots of complaints on the forums and Reddits, etc. We got to have two-factor in a game that it has, some economic value behind your character's time put into the game. People are going to explicitly go out and try to hack people. I've heard, I don't know how this is happening. I've heard there's some way that people are able to hack you just by like going to your hideout or something like that. I don't know if there's some peer-to-peer vulnerabilities or something going on. I don't know. I'm not a security expert, but I do know that two-factor authentication is something that should be immediately implemented in the game, in my own personal opinion. Okay, number two, after playing on console to test the experience, it plays really smooth and fun on console, but we have got to get console players a loot filter because the higher up you go and the more time you invest in the game, it becomes more and more unplayable with the amount of loot that actually drops and how much you have to sift through the sands. Plus, if you have a big TV and you're sitting on your couch, it's more or less unreadable. Like actually being able to like, I'm looking for a waypoint tier 15. Let me put on my, you might as well be at the opera there with like the little thing where you're like peering down. It's basically impossible to read some of the loot drops that show up. So I think loot filter, two-factor authentication, these in my opinion are two things that would massively improve feelings about the game immediately. Other than that, my current feeling about the game is most of the feedback points are tuning issues that aren't major core, like the player base is bleeding out, the game is fundamentally flawed. Like these are tuning issues that I think will be solved fairly easily. And I'm actually feeling pretty positive both about the state of the game and its upcoming state of the game as I look back on this last week of playing solo self-found and just kind of playing through the game. Anyway, that's it. Love you all. I'll see you on the live stream today. We've got a new character. We're trying out the Mercenary. There'll be a link down below you can watch, as well as I'm supposed to be playing through the campaign here in a little bit with the Act Man. That's about it. See you there.